is Dexter from A2K, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Mitigate Construction Risks using Autodesk BIM 360 Coordinate and Build. So we'll have technical consultant lead, Chad Smith, presenting for us. So first, we'll just go through about A2K, all about fostering innovation through consulting and training. A2K Technologies plays a vital role in helping the infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach their full potential by delivering complete technology solutions and support services such as education, consulting, and IT managed services. We're working with visionaries to shape the future of design and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivities, and achieve excellence. A2K Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet clients' technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by understanding the challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients and companies of any size nationally and abroad. Let's get started, Chad.
Thanks, Dexter. Good morning or good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are in daylight savings. My name's Chad Smith. I'm a consulting technical lead at A2K Technologies. I help deliver and train and support and so forth a variety of design technologies, of which both Revit and BIM 360 fall under my territory. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The Zoom app has a Q&A panel. If you'd like to ask questions either during or towards the end of the session, feel free to use the Q&A panel and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the session. We'll also keep everybody's mic muted so that there's no background noise as well. So today we're going to talk about the construction industry and how BIM 360 is being used to help mitigate some of the risk in terms of not only that sort of pre-design and that design and pre-construction process, but also more importantly, the delivery of the project itself. As we know, the AEC industry is an incredibly complex industry, particularly when it comes to software. And the software produces an incredible amount of data that is needing to be managed, and most notably managed in a cloud environment these days, just to provide accessibility for all team members who need to obviously work and push this project forward. But historically, the workflows between this data has been quite disconnected, and hence technologies like BIM 360 are helping the industry to sort of reconnect things back together so that those people can access the information at any time, and most notably from any type of device. Just a little bit of history about why BIM 360 exists and how it differs from a variety of other technologies that you may have used in the past. You're probably quite familiar with older technology such as FTP sites and even Microsoft SharePoint. Whilst being good for delivering just general business and enterprise data, both of these technologies have been expensive and quite complex to implement for businesses. You're probably familiar with using network drives within your own organization and from a central file location or a server. But this is, whilst it's good for internal work, it fails when it comes to being able to connect other people externally to your business. With the increase of cloud storage locations, these are great for sharing information to other people, but they lack a design focus, and they're not really that designed for a design-related workflow, particularly for the construction industry. They also don't integrate with the design data in very intelligent ways. And lastly is point solutions. So basically rolling your own solution to help solve a number of smaller challenges that you have. But again, much like the SharePoint at the other end of the scale, rolling your own point cloud solutions can be a costly and time-consuming process. So that's why Autodesk came up with BIM 360. Because Autodesk are a design-focused company that obviously produce design-orientated tools, it makes sense for them to also then to branch out into the construction industry to tie that design process to the construction process itself. And it does this by putting all the data in a cloud location so that everybody can connect to it from whichever mobile device or desktop device, laptop, whatever it may be, so that they can access the information in an easy manner that makes sense to the role that they're undertaking. And obviously, when we're talking about a cloud environment, we're also talking about typically a whole range of and large volumes of data. And particularly when we're talking about how we mitigate the risk on a project and its delivery, we want to be able to reuse that information so that we can analyze it, gather insights, and then hopefully reduce the number of issues that may be raised on all future projects. So when we think about it, BIM 360 at the heart of its workflows and so forth is about mitigating the risk. And I don't need to explain this in depth to you. You understand what those areas of risk are, as you can see on the screen. But BIM 360 can help you to mitigate them in various areas throughout different stages of the design and construct process. Now, if you're new to BIM 360 and you've heard about it, but you don't know too much about just what it involves or the various components of it, let's just go through a fairly high-level overview, because there are quite a number of modules that make up the overall BIM 360 platform. And some of those will be relevant to you, other areas probably won't be. But collectively, it works together as a single source of truth for that delivery. Now, we're going to start just here briefly with the design tools, because this being an Autodesk product and the fact that Autodesk do produce design authoring tools, then it makes sense that some of their own design tools integrate natively into BIM 360. And this actually works to its advantage because it puts the design data very, very closely to that construction process. So therefore, it makes that design information more accessible to the downstream users. Now, just running through a number of these modules here, BIM 360 Design, if you ever hear about it, is for the design teams. So we're not going to focus on that for the purpose of this presentation, but it does allow those design products to work natively or integrate more natively into the BIM 360 process. Next, we have BIM 360 Docs, and this is basically the heart of where information is stored for not only Docs access, but also other modules that partake in the BIM 360 workflow. Docs is the document management storage location, and therefore things like models and drawings can be stored so that they can be viewed and leveraged throughout some of these other modules that include BIM 360 Coordinate for model aggregation and coordination of the design files, BIM 360 Build, which puts the information out on site with a mobile device so that those out on site can access the information. And not only that, they can report on the construction process and feed some of that information back into the design process. Now, around the outside of those are just some secondary products that fall under BIM 360, such as BIM 360 Layout for taking our BIM information and putting it into surveying equipment, BIM 360 Plan for doing task management for trades and subcontractors during the construction process. And once we get through the construction process, putting it into BIM 360 Ops as a mobile first building maintenance and operations tool. And most of these modules also tie into BIM 360 Insight, which is the analytics and reporting aspect. And since we're talking about mitigating risk, this plays quite an important part to the information that becomes available, more specifically to the project managers and upper management teams, so that they can understand just how well the project is performing. Before we move on, just a brief overview on the subscription entitlements that ties into that workflow that we just saw a moment ago. There are 4 main licenses, and each of those licenses contains one or more different modules. And you can see them listed underneath each of those license types. For this presentation, we're going to focus on the Coordinate and build licenses, because they are the ones that form the pre-construction through to construction stages. And each of those two licenses, along with their corresponding modules, each come complementary with, as you can see underneath it, the document management module, which forms as part of the docs licensing. So it's important to note that at the lowest licensing level, docs will get somebody into the system so that they can start reviewing things like models and drawings, but then extending upon that access to those models and drawings, we can then provide additional or higher level licensing for those respective users who need to coordinate and build. So I'm going to take you through a bit of a high level overview of a number of the features that make up docs, coordinate and build. And I'll finish off the session with a brief live example as well. Now, I'm going to start with docs because, as I said just a moment ago, this is the starting level. This is the entry level for a user. And some of these features become very much applicable in some of those other modules. So we'll build on it from there. So what is docs? Docs is a document management system so that users can upload or publish their information into that project space. It makes the project information shareable so that other users can access the information. And once they have access to the information, they can go forth and view it natively within within a web browser or on a mobile device. And this is certainly what sets BIM 360 apart from other cloud products and even other industry tools, in that BIM 360 provides native access to the viewing of 2D and 3D files. We're not just talking about PDFs and IFCs, we're talking about DWG files, Revit files. It does have IFC support, obviously, Office files. It has support for just about 100 different file formats that can be natively viewed within a web browser without ever having those design tools installed on your machine. And this is important because once you have the capability to view the information, it means you can now partake in that communication process, whether it be design, pre-construction, or the construction process itself. So BIM 360 Docs is a basic sort of folder file setup whereby we create folders, we upload files so that people can access them. But they can only access the information that they are entitled to access. So BIM 360 has a range of permissions that can control who can access which information, from as simple as just being able to view the information through to being able to have full management of it. Now, when files are uploaded, they are versioned. So that means that as information is updated and re-uploaded, or in the case of design information, such as a Revit model that is constantly being worked on and saved, that information becomes versioned. That means BIM 360 contains a historical record of our files, and not only containing a historical version of it, but those versions are now used for doing design comparisons. If you're familiar with other tools such as Bluebeam, you'll know that you have the ability to review 2D information. Well, BIM 360 takes that further. We can not only do 2D comparisons, but we can also do BIM comparisons as well. And this is important so that we can better understand and get insights into how the design models are being iterated with time. Once we have a better understanding as to how the model and the project information is iterating, well, then we can use the markups tools and the issues tools so that we can capture that communication over the top of it and relay that information back to some of our other participating consultants and contractors so that they can then act on that information. It's important to note that the likes of issues in particular fall under a managed workflow. So that is, when an issue is raised, somebody's actually responsible for it all the way through to resolution. And that information is granular and it's transparent so that certain people on the project can actually see how those issues are tracking. And this is quite important for the construction process. And as you'll see when we have a look at the coordinate and build licenses with their modules. So as we manage the document information, we can put them into document sets so that we can essentially group common information together. We can push them through approval workflows so that way information can be reviewed and approved or maybe rejected if need be. And obviously anything that then becomes approved, we may then like to send on to other people by way of an electronic transmittal notification. And we use the transmittals tools to achieve that. Building upon our file integration, as I said before, there's around 100 different file formats that can be natively viewed in BIM 360, and Office 365 actually has quite a close integration, so you can upload your typical Excel, Word files and so forth. You can view them, and if you are an Office 365 subscriber, you can even edit those files natively and directly within the BIM 360 interface. And if you prefer to use synced drives instead, well then the Autodesk Desktop Connector helps you to put those files in a local drive that's synced so that you can access them via a drive rather than having to go through the web browser. It's up to you. So now that we have a better understanding as to the fact that we can store documents, and I'll use the term documents just as a broad term for 2D and 3D information moving forward. So now that we can store this information, we can now act on it as part of that review process, most notably through the coordination. The roles of the BIM manager, consultant, and contractor is important. And for the most part, the methodology of this coordination process remains the same as you've likely done over the last decade. Models are created, they are federated for undertaking coordination tasks, issues are found and then resolved, and the process repeats. However, the process and the tools are evolving to meet the cloud hosting expectations. Specifically, in the case of design-focused BIM 360 environment, design models are more readily available to the coordination process. And this results in a faster access to the design data and therefore a fast turnaround time of the coordination tasks. So having a look at some of the functionality that falls underneath the coordinate license, as you have typically done in the past, probably with the likes of Navisworks, we can merge or append, depending on the terminology you prefer to use, you can merge or append those models together so that you can undertake a variety of tasks, starting with visual inspections. So if I wanted to merge together the structural and maybe the services models, we can do that so that we can then walk the project. We can walk through it to understand visually how the project is performing, because not everything can be captured through automation and rules. Sometimes it just needs a set of eyes on the project. And as we're walking the project, we might then like to capture some of the issues that we find along the way. So using the issues feature that we saw back over in underneath the docs module, that same issues feature can now be brought forward into the coordination process itself. However, we know from experience that coordination is about doing clash management tasks. So using the clash detection functionality, we can use those merged models so that we can quickly identify clashes so that we can then raise specifically coordination issues. Now, there are a variety of issue types in BIM 360. There's design issues, there are safety issues, there might be customer feedback or client feedback issues, and in this case here, we can raise a coordination issue specifically. But we know that not all issues are issues. they might be non-issues. And this is where things may only just touch. They may be penetrations that haven't been modeled. It may be able to be a site fix during the construction process and so forth. So therefore, those non-issues can also be flagged so that they don't keep reoccurring through this coordination process. Now, I just want to point out with BIM 360 Coordinate, there are some limitations. So if you are a Navisworks user who is used to using the high granularity that you have when doing a Navisworks clash detective task, you're not going to have that same level of granularity inside of BIM 360. BIM 360 takes a more simplified approach, something that's centralized and is easy to use by users. But BIM 360 does have integration into some of those design or those desktop design tools, such as Navisworks and even Revit. Now, the integration with Navisworks has only just recently, within the last week, I believe, hit version 2, and we can now take our integration quite a bit further forward. So we can see just in the images here that we can find clashes, and we can also review any clashes or any issues that were raised within BIM 360 directly within the Navisworks interface. We can also, in Navisworks, append BIM 360 models. So maybe you are a highly skilled Navisworks user, but you still need to use BIM 360 data. Navisworks, along with this version 2 integration, can now append BIM 360 models natively so that you can create your own Navisworks NWF file and even save that NWF file back onto BIM 360 so that it's all stored and contained within the same central location so that other users might want to use that same NWF file. And not to mention capturing a whole range of other Navisworks specific information using those BIM 360 models. Now, not quite up to the same level as the Navisworks integration is the beta version of the Revit integration. It is essentially the same set of tools. It has the same docked panel so that you can browse those BIM 360 issues, identify where they are inside your Revit design model, and so that way they can be reviewed, hopefully resolved, and then therefore closed and having that information synced back up to BIM 360. So if you do have a go at the Revit integration, just note it is a beta at this stage. It is freely available, but it is a beta. So now that we've got our design models stored in docs that are being coordinated through that coordinate license, okay, once we hit that pre-construction and construction stage, we can now start sending this information out on site so that site managers, subcontractors and so forth can access and create their own information. BIM 360 Build contains quite a number of modules. Probably most notably is their field management module, so that things like inspections can be undertaken. Issues can be raised that are for construction-related issues rather than design issues. And obviously being able to report on any of those issues that are raised throughout this process. And just like the design issues, construction issues go through a managed workflow, as you can see on the screen. That is, an issue is raised, it can then be issued to the correct and responsible party for resolution. They have to then obviously resolve that construction issue. So therefore, the owner of the issue can then check that the work has been done and then closed out at the end of the day. Again, this is relevant to things like quality and safety. Also underneath the build license are other modules, particularly the project management module, which allows you to capture RFIs. You can work with other parties with submittals so that the information, things like materials and so forth, can be captured. And also capturing the minutes of meetings as well so that everybody's on the same page moving forward. More recently, though, is the new assets module. So building upon some of the past BIM 360 tools that are now in a legacy mode, such as their BIM 360 field, all right, is the ability to capture asset information. Now, this is in its early stages, and it is focusing at this stage on written asset information rather than tying it back to the model itself. At this stage, we can import or create natively inside of BIM 360 a range of assets so that we can capture that asset information either before commissioning or during the commissioning process. We can track the status anywhere from being specified through to the actual operations. And when assets are ultimately commissioned, they need to go through a checklist process to make sure that it has been installed correctly. And if any issues are found as part of that installation process, well, then again, an issue can be raised. We can see here that we have a range of functionality coming together now, once again, heading towards being able to mitigate any of that risk all the way up to the operational stage of the building. And BIM 360 is certainly growing. Now, something that A2K can't necessarily talk about too much because this falls a little bit more under the Autodesk banner at this stage. So we would have to put you in contact with Autodesk, is Autodesk Construction Cloud Platform. And this obviously ties in with BIM 360, which is the topic of today's session. Autodesk, over the last few years, has been acquiring a number of third-party tools to build out their portfolio of construction-focused tools. And they now have a range of tools, as you can see on the screen at the moment covering a variety of different stages through the construction process. Some of these tools overlap with features, some of them do their own unique things. In particular, the Assemble tool, when tied in with BIM 360, allows Assemble to organize model information, in particular to be able to capture asset names so that we can bring that information into BIM 360 to generate our initial assets list. It means that we can then utilize those BIM 360 assets so that we can manage their status, such as when they become specified, delivered, installed, and so forth. And then utilizing that information, we can then send it back out to Assemble so that other analysis of the model and that data can be achieved. In particular, being able to graphically visualize the status of the project by way of using color so that we can see quite clearly what information has actually been delivered versus installed, as an example. And probably more exciting yet is the Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect platform. So BIM 360 is just one part of this process. However, using the Autodesk Connect platform, we can now connect different platforms together by way of simple rules. You might be familiar with other consumer-orientated tools such as If This, Then That, or Zapier. Think of the Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect platform as an IFTT platform, but for construction. So in this case, simple rules and tasks can be created so that you can connect your Autodesk project and information into other business critical systems. And in this case here, it has over 200 pre-built integrations between both Autodesk software and non-Autodesk software. Now, we've been talking about capturing all of this information, and when we do so, there's no point in capturing it if we can't learn from it. So this is currently where we stand today in terms of utilization of project data. We're not talking about drawings, we're talking about the metadata that's captured during that design and construct process. So design and construct as a whole is very slowly moving as a united industry and starting to check off some of these technology goals that you can see on the screen at the moment. Most companies, let's face it, they're still on probably paper, out on site, still checking things off. Other companies have been moving into digital methods. They could be things like using an iPad with maybe Excel on it. Fewer, again, have moved their digital methods into data-rich digital methods that maximize the value of that data. And fewer, again, are leveraging that data through predictive analysis. And this is currently where BIM 360 sits at the very top up here. It not only wants to capture the information, but it wants you to be able to learn from it through some level of inherent intelligence built into the platform itself. So Insight gives you, as it suggests, insights into this data by way of things like graphs and other information such as reports. It is in some way also aimed at the executive level of your businesses and also maybe the project managers as well. For those people, they can start seeing high-level metrics that they can start drilling down into to see just how those projects are performing. And here we can see one of those high-level overviews whereby a handful of projects have a high level of risk versus other projects that have a lower level. This risk is then quantified along with other associated details. So we start drilling down into this information so that we can start seeing that there might be some subcontractor risks or maybe water risks and so forth. And not only that, but it also can tie in with other third-party information, such as this True Look job site camera that we can see in the top right-hand corner of this dashboard. It's not just about accessing Autodesk and BIM 360 information. This information is delivered through the use of the card library, so you can customize your own experience depending on the risk that you need to manage and the data that you need to have access through. Here we can see some of the Autodesk specific cards that relate specifically to issues and RFIs and submittals. However, using some third-party integrations, that information can then be expanded out into other vendor software, such as 3DR, Drone Deploy, Holo Builder, and so forth. BIM 360 is aiming to be the central repository of information for both Autodesk products and third party so that you can capture all of this data in a central location and therefore see all of the risk that goes into that. And let's not forget the reporting aspect of it. This is for obvious reasons, in case we need to provide reports to various people who may not even be part of the BIM 360 project. It just provides you that flexibility and routine about accessing reportable information that can be delivered on schedule directly to your inbox. And we shouldn't forget about the Autodesk Forge platform, because all of this is made possible because of Autodesk Forge. Autodesk Forge is the entry point for developers, both Autodesk and third party, so that they can access BIM 360 information. I'm not talking about just files, but we're talking about the data stored within those files. It means that custom interfaces can be developed by your company, or maybe if you've got a custom development team within your organization that can perform this for you. It means you can develop these custom interfaces that drill down and break apart this information, such as the models, the floor plans, even graphing this information if need be. Now, this is a simple example that you can see on the screen and is easily accessible through the Autodesk examples, but having a look at something a little bit more real world, we can see that J.E. Dunn here, a construction company in the US, has used Forge with BIM 360 data and tied this into their own costing system. So this way they have real-time information about how the project is performing by way of cost at any point in time. And I've heard that they've even provided their clients with a simplified version of this so that the client can get that real-time data, which is only available because they can tie directly into that BIM 360 data. And even Google, who we typically see as a technology company, are also a building and real estate company. They have copious amounts of data centers that need to be managed, and therefore they use the Forge platform with some of the BIM 360 APIs in order to process their data center information, even though Google themselves are a data center company that can store the data. They're still using the design tools by Autodesk Forge so that they can interrogate and gather insights into that project information. And this information or this capability is also open to you through the integration of third-party tools as well. So you don't have to focus on developing your own tools. There is a library or essentially an app store that you can connect other tools into, again, bringing it into that central location being BIM 360. Okay, so I just want to go over a brief demonstration of just some of these features so that you can get a bit of a feel for how they perform. Let's start over here inside the document management space. This particular project already has some models that have been uploaded as part of the BIM 360 design workflow so that those designers during the design stage have a place to store and work on their files. Now, this design information can then be published out, which in this case, up underneath the plan section here, we now have a range of 2D drawings and even a 3D model that we can now review. And we can see here some review has already been undertaken on some of these files by way of markups, issues, RFIs, even the approval process by pushing some of these documents through to an approving manager before they then get consumed by other people. If we actually dive into one of these documents, so just a fairly standard floor plan, we can see that we've got our floor plan that's vectorized. We can navigate it quite easily, as we can see here. And over on the left-hand side, we've got our list of markups, which we can quickly click through. And if we'd like to raise a markup of our own, let's say we're getting quite a few on here. I think there's a window there. So maybe we needed to remove this window. We just grab our markup tools, maybe put a cloud around it, maybe reach for our text tool. Let's type in here, just ignore the fact that it is super huge at the moment. And we'll just reduce the size of it, and we'll give that a fill, and we'll make that completely white. Oops. So let's just click out of that. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so we'll just do this, and I'm going to make this a public markup. So we'll publish it. You'll notice it goes into the list on the left-hand side, and you'll also notice the version that it's attached to. So as I said in the PowerPoint slides, the information is never lost, it's just versioned. And in this case here, it is attached to a specific version so that way when a version 5 of this document comes through, we can see where this markup exists in time. From this point and forward, if this actually gets resolved, well then we can go ahead and archive that markup, and that'll remove it from the list. An issue, on the other hand, let's have a look. Okay, so here we've got an issue. It says the door needed to be removed. It has quite a higher level of granularity in terms of the information that's stored against it. And probably more importantly, again, is the probity into this information so that we can actually track to see how the issue is progressing from the initial conception all the way through to when it's been answered, any other attachments, and ultimately all the way through to when this does become closed. Now, those issues that we raise, let's jump back over to the document management space, are now found over on the project level issues tab. Here we can see we have both design and coordination related issues. If I needed to find out what this issue was, we would select it. We would see similar information to what we saw over on the drawing, including a link through to that specific drawing so that we can go and see it in context. Now, this design process continues through the review of other contributing members. But now that we've got our design models ready to be coordinated, we can jump over to the model coordination feature. Here we can see we have a number of coordination spaces. And these are basically individual spaces where we can say, here is a selection of files that we would like to coordinate. We don't always have to coordinate all files against all other files. We can create a smaller subset of those for, so that we can create a smaller coordination space. In this coordination space, we can go ahead and select individual models and actually view them together. This is just an aggregation process, or federation if you would like to refer to it, so that we can say which models would we like to see together. Now, I could hit the view button up here, but over on the views tab, I've already created a couple of predefined views that contain some of these aggregated models. We can go ahead and now click through to it. And this obviously has to go ahead and load two models that are overlaid on top of each other. So this will just take a little moment for these models to load. Hopefully not too long, remembering I am on a tethered connection. And here we can see we have our structure model and our services model. Now, this is at this stage for a visual inspection. And I can go ahead and use the first person navigation tools to maybe click down on the floor so that I can now quite literally just do a little bit of a virtual walkthrough. I can go through. This is probably going to come through a little bit choppy over the internet, but we can see there, we can find certain elements that we'd like to inspect, maybe over here as well. And once we find something that doesn't quite stack up, so here we have a duct running into a structural member, we can use those same issue creation tools to put an issue over the top of it. Alternatively, my issues list now gives me better, and I just need to turn off my first person navigation there. So let's just jump back and click it again. It gives me better visibility of those existing issues, as we can see. Now, coordination isn't just about doing a visual check. We need to then do our clash management process. And we do actually have a clash tab over on the left-hand side here that I can go ahead and select. But if I was just to jump out of this for the moment, and in this case, jump over to the clashes tab, we can now see a heat map or matrix of all the models and how they clash against all other models within my coordination space. Here I can see that I have my mechanical model. When compared against the structural model, it has found 71 clashes. We can now use this as a guide to focus on those models that maybe have the most number of clashes, or pick one of these other cells, such as this one, so that we can click through, and that'll essentially take me back through to that same tab that I was referring to a moment ago. So again, it is loading two models, just giving it a moment to finish loading here, and we can now see at a very high level where all of those clashes exist. We can use the results panel on the left hand here to quickly move through them, and when we find a clash, we can then quite simply raise a clash related issue by putting a pin over the top and then filling out the same the same issue information as we would if we were capturing a design related issue. Now that the clash process or the coordination process is evolving and hopefully reducing the issues, we're now ready to move out on site. So this is when we can now move to our field management module, whereby we can see we have a range of checklists that have been either started or completed for various aspects or assets on this project. If we have a look, I'm just going to expand this out a little bit. Up the top, we can see here we've got a quality checklist for the installation of some steel framing. Maybe down towards the bottom here, we've got some commissioning checklists, which in this case here is for an exhaust fan, and it's currently in progress. So let's click through and have a look at how this checklist is progressing. And just while that's loading up, noting that this is typically a mobile application process for somebody out on site, obviously. We're just looking at it through the web browser on a desktop instead. Here we can see the checklist outline on the left-hand side and the various questions that come along with it. And underneath each one of those sections, we can now review the questions and what their answers are. Now, obviously, we want everything to pass as part of the commissioning process, but when something is to fail, so therefore raising a non-conformance, we can tick that off and then even raise an issue for that non-conformance itself. That issue, as you would expect, connects back into that issues process so that we can hopefully resolve that issue, maybe come back to the checklist and then pass it, or maybe having to restart the checklist process again, maybe a week or so later. Now, this is important to understand the fact that there is checklists and issues, because those are then utilized underneath the assets module. So as those assets are being delivered and installed out on site, and assuming that we've entered in all of the asset information that is probably derived from the model in the first place, so noting that there is an importation tool, we can go ahead and classify them, as we can see over on the left-hand side, maybe drilling down into one of those classifications, such as the fans, and then we can select it and start filling out the numerous commissioning or asset information that we would expect to capture. We can additionally see that it has an allocation for identifying those issues and the checklist that we saw a moment ago under the field management module. And assuming that everything has passed as part of that commissioning, well, then we can go ahead and update the status to something that's a little bit more appropriate for the next stage. So as we can see here, we've got a range of modules depending on the user and their role, and each one of these is heading towards the mitigation of the risk, and all of this information then feeds into the Insights module. So let me just get this one open up to finish off. Let's close those other tabs. Now, depending on where you come into the Assets module will depend on the level of information that you have available to you. Because I've come in from the project level, it means that it's going to give me project level insight information. If I instead came in through the account administration, well, then it would give me all projects at a very high level that I could then use to drill back down into the project. But here we can see this project only has a small amount of data in it, but here we can see some of those risks that we may need to focus on. We could possibly drill down into the water risks, where we can see the issues which are currently in an open state. And we can use any one of these tabs across the top here, maybe for, let's see here, maybe the quality. So again, so we can start focusing in on some of these more granular aspects that we need to review, and including the ability to generate and export out our reports. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of time. What I'm going to do is just jump back over to the PowerPoint. All right. If you've got any questions, please do type them into the Q&A window. I'm just going to open that window up. All right. So if you've got any questions, please type them into the Q&A panel within Zoom. Just while you're doing that, just taking note that we're putting on quite a number of events recently, particularly for those people who are working from home and don't necessarily have the best level of access to this information. You can visit that information at a2ktechnologies.com.au/events. And lastly, I would like to invite you, if you have any questions that you don't necessarily want to raise as part of this session, then I want to invite you to have just a one-on-one private session. You can visit that Calendly link at the bottom there, and we will send out a thank you email that can contain this as well. So if you don't happen to capture it right now, but I do invite you, if you want to have a private one-on-one session just to discuss any of the BIM 360 topics that we've been through, or any other BIM 360 topics that you may have, either as just yourself or maybe other individuals within your organization, then you are free to do so. This link will be open for all of tomorrow and the following day, so the next 2 days. So it doesn't look as though anybody's got any questions. So I think what we'll do is we'll close out the session, and I appreciate you taking the time to jump on today. Hopefully that was of some value so that you can understand some of those BIM 360 construction focused tools.